Joining us now is Charlie Kirk, the founder and president of Turning Point USA and the host of the best-selling book, The MAGA Doctrine. Charlie, when we look at these latest calls coming from many of those on the left, it's defund the police. And the more that we learn about it, the more we learn that they mean it quite literally. I mean, some say reforms, some say complete abolishment. What is your response to those calls?
If you hate law enforcement, you hate the law. The left has now been on the side of anarchy and chaos for a couple weeks. We have now seen the streets of Seattle taken over by insurrectionists. We are seeing the streets of our country be burned to the ground. This war on police is not rooted in data. It is not rooted in facts. Police officers have saved hundreds of thousands of lives and hundreds of thousands of Black and Hispanic lives. Even in New York City, tens of thousands of individuals live because of police officers. And we know this because of the pro-police push that happened in the mid-1990s, where over 2,000 Black and Hispanic individuals were being murdered in the streets every single year. Mayor Giuliani takes over, and that number went down to 300 a year. So you're talking about thousands of people every year that were living because of the push to get more police officers on the streets and smarter police methods. This attack on law enforcement is so disturbing. It will result in a even more bitterly divided America. And the left has been known to overly pander to criminals. The left has been known to try to placate the most radical elements of American society. And this must be met with harsh and immediate cross-examination to stand for the Constitution and for the rule of law.
It is an unfortunate thing where a lot of people only show appreciation for our nation's law enforcement during a time of crisis. I mean, we could think back to all the way back to September 11th, if you will, and think about how we were praising first responders then. But even more recently, for example, when the coronavirus pandemic was first starting, we were praising those on the front line. We were praising those, even on the left, we're praising the police officers for enforcing lockdowns at the time. So I think that it is a movement right now that maybe is being looked at in a vacuum a little bit. And I think the American people are generally on board with police as well. I mean, it's one of the few institutions where people do show support for the police and among many other institutions as well. So from a political angle, what does this mean for Republicans and how they should use it against Democrats going into November?
I mean, look, this is why it's widely popular to have a police force. I mean, I can't believe this isn't even a conversation in our country. But I've spoken on many college campuses. And when I go and speak on behalf of Turning Point USA, I have activists that come out and say, abolish prisons, abolish the Constitution. So you understand a lot of this is incubated and started at the most radical elements in American colleges and universities. And so I don't think this will end well politically. You can see Senate Democrats start to distance themselves from some of this language. However, this is what the left wants. They want anarchy. They want a burning America. And now the idea of having law enforcement and having some form of a prison system is considered unspeakable for them. This is unacceptable. And these anti-American forces that have now taken over the Democrat Party, they must be stopped. And quite honestly, I've been disappointed by the lack of Republicans in Congress that have stood up against these American arsonists in the Democrat Party that kowtow to the radicals in the Black Lives Matter movement, that kowtow to the attack of our law enforcement, that are perfectly okay with marching alongside them or taking a knee. No more. We need courage back in the Republican Party. We need courage and conviction, or else they are going to fundamentally destroy America as we know it.
And I think you bring up an important point, too, is that this isn't just about police reforms. For example, if you want to defund the police, the other half of that argument that is being made is that means that resources then gets put into different community type of resources, whether it's a socialistic program of welfare, whatever it may be. There's a whole nother part of that. It's not just a matter of defunding the police. And when we look at this, too, I mean, it's something that we see on the streets being driven largely by young people. That's something, too, that, I mean, a lot of our congressional lawmakers, as you were just saying right there, are saying that they're siding with those protesters. But I think in order to be very clear about what's going on, you have to look at the agenda behind it as well. So you bring up the idea, too, that Congress isn't necessarily responding to this in the way that you'd like. How should lawmakers be meeting this moment?
You need to stand for truth. You need to stop worrying what the Washington Post is going to call you and look the left in the eye and call them what they are, which is that they are intentionally misrepresenting law enforcement as some sort of sinister force in our country. I don't see the courage. I mean, the president's been phenomenal, but he's fighting alone. I don't see the courage amongst the Republicans that is needed to create a counteroffensive against the left's intent to fundamentally destroy America from within. And so, I mean, I take plenty of arrows for saying, hey, did you know that a police officer is actually 18 and a half times more likely to be shot by a black person than an unarmed black person is to be shot by a police officer? I don't hear members of Congress saying these numbers, but they should, because what's happening right now is a moving of the Overton window. They're trying to silence those of us that use data, facts, logic, and critical thinking. And this is a very serious moment for America. And so maybe it's time to, and the other thing is they say, well, we need to fund these communities more. We've spent $30 trillion on the failed welfare state, $30 trillion and there's probably even more if you count state and local budgets. And that has not made urban communities richer. In fact, it's done the opposite. We have a 77% fatherlessness rate in the black community. We have huge issues of systemic crime, and it's not because of systemic racism. It's because of systemic Democrat control. It's because of Democrat monopolization over urban cities that have kept these communities perpetually poor. It's time for us to start to stand up for what's right and not worry about what the media is going to call us.
I think you're right when you say that, too, because when we even talk about that issue of reaching out to black Americans, it seems like the messaging is really coming from the White House. I mean, we could talk about the First Step Act, and that was something that did require some congressional support, but that was really something pushed by the White House. And we talk about how the president's always talking about economic numbers, how the economy was lifting up black Americans in this country. It's something that is almost exclusively coming from the White House. So I think that may be something that may play into his favor come November, but I think a lot of these other lawmakers, I think you're right to say that they need to figure out what they're doing. Charlie Kirk, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.